Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Several items on your agenda today. The first is an update with regards to shared electric mobility scooters. That's an item that has come forward to the city's attention since your last meeting on July 3rd. Michael Moore is here from Transportation to give you a general update, and we're looking to get some feedback off of our proposed next steps. So, Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon. And I have jumped ahead, so you can tell I'm a rookie at this, so excuse me. As the manager said, we're here today to get a little bit of feedback from you on a phenomenon that we've seen hit the Raleigh streets here very recently, and that is bird scooters. We're going to kind of cover a little bit of background today, do a little bit of table setting about what the operating model is, some of the issues that we see. We'd be interested in the issues that you see, the legal framework that is out there today, give you a little bit of background on some of the benchmarking that we've done, and talk about some potential next steps and some questions that we would want to consider about that. So on July 11th, we saw about 150 dockless scooters deployed in the city of Raleigh. These scooters are powered by an electric motor. They can do about 15 miles an hour. They were originally deployed in downtown, Glenwood South, and Cameron Village, but because of the range, you've probably seen them in spots much more distant than that recently. A point that I think is very important to make, there was no enabling action that occurred prior to the deployment of these scooters that allow them to actually exist and operate in the right-of-way, so there's no permitting process that happened there. Bird's operating model is that the scooter rentals are accessed via a smartphone app. These are kind of important items because they sort of align with some of the pieces that we see related to how mopeds operate. But to operate, you have to be 18 years old and have a valid driver's license. You have to have a helmet. You have to ride in the street, and you've probably seen circumstances where this is not the case. And you must park the scooter safely so that it's not an impediment to pedestrians, and you have to provide that proof by providing an app, a photograph, and that you put into the application at the conclusion of the rental period. The rentals are $1. There's 15 cents per minute. They do have a program for equity for some folks who may not be able to afford it and would qualify, where it's no initial dollar charge, and it's about 7 cents a minute after that. Bird, I think, is important to note in that their operating model, they collect the scooters each night and they redeploy them in the morning. There are some other dockless scooter companies that do not do that. They're just out there until they are run out of battery, and then they have to be collected. Some of the issues that we see there today, while these can be a very effective mobility device for people going short distances, for that sort of first and last mile, maybe from transit or from parking garage to where they're working, they can present some other issues that we see. Of course, there's the impact on public safety. There's differential speeds between pedestrians and how fast people go on the sidewalk. They can present tripping hazards. They have some impact on sidewalk access, particularly where we have a lot of outdoor dining like Glenwood South. They can be an impact on city resources. And lastly, just to reinforce the point, they do not have a permit to operate in the right-of-way currently. We have done some good work with the City Attorney's Office. They have also worked with the attorney assigned out of the Attorney General's Office to the Department of Motor Vehicles. These are a moped. They're classified as a moped under the law, and as you can see, you have to have title, insurance, plates for that. They must be operated with a helmet. You must be 16 years old for a moped, and again, if you go back and see what Bird requires, they actually require 18 years old and a driver's license, where a moped does not require a driver's license. And you cannot park these on the sidewalk. Our law roughly follows that. One important thing is they're not allowed on greenways. That is the case here. They're also not allowed in bike lanes, so that's a little bit of a catch-22 for the scooter operators today. And then generally, the scooter driver would be the one who would be issued the violation for any enforcement actions there. We've done a bit of benchmarking. Generally, cities out there have taken about 3 different approaches. One would be a direct prohibition or ban on the items, on the scooters. One would be sort of a pilot regulatory program, and then would be sort of moving toward a permanent regulatory structure. A lot of cases I can think of, particularly like in Portland, they put together a moratorium on all of these. They had a bit of experience with dockless bikes before they had dockless scooters. They put a moratorium in place until they could put all of their regulations in place to permit these kind of in the long term. Most cities have gone to a program where there has sort of been an interim period of development where they have an opportunity to evaluate. So you'll see a lot of these as an interim or a pilot program. Most have limitations on fleet sizes, both minimums and maximums. They want to make sure that they have coverage, but not so much that the market is oversaturated. They have requirements for permitting. This is a case where if you look, you'll see that the initial fees vary wildly from very little to $15,000 as a price of entry, but then prices may be based on per unit, the number per scooter, per bike that you see out there. They all have requirements as where you can park and ride, and all have some sort of data sharing requirements because cities want to know where people are using these, where they go, what kind of movements they have, and take that so they can use it for other opportunities like maybe their own bike share programs. We have looked at Charlotte very closely in that they exist in sort of a very similar regulatory environment. They looked at a number of these very same things. One of the things I'd like to point out here, they had a dockless bike share pilot program that they amended to include scooters. That pilot expires November 1st. We're looking to see what evaluation they come out of that period of time. They elected to treat scooters more like bicycles, and that they have sort of similar operating characteristics and similar speeds. What's important to note about that is that would mean a bike can operate on the sidewalk, and and bikes do operate on the sidewalk. That is a permissible operation. You don't see it reflected in their current plan, their current program, but they've told me that as they move forward on this, you'll see them put into their future statutes prohibitions on operating on the sidewalk in certain areas, particularly their uptown area and a couple of areas up around the university area. So that would be where they would just carve out, and you would not be able to operate on the sidewalk there. Some potential next steps we have. BPAC, as they had in their approved work plan, we're going to develop some processes for dockless bike systems, and you'll start to see that. I think we plan on bringing that to you on September 4th. The BPAC is going to recommend a master encroachment process. That would be the permitting process for this. That'll have, it will be the way that we provide opportunity for dockless systems in the right-of-way. There'll be, of course, a host of sort of stipulations that go with that will come to you for approval. That would be one model that we could use for this. Based on your feedback, we could also develop an interim program that would work under that encroachment process. It would have detailed requirements for dockless scooters, not just for dockless bikes, but for dockless scooters. Also specific to Bird, we would want to have them operate legally, so we would direct them to get that necessary encroachment. We could also proceed along the line of a cease and desist until we put those measures in place. It would be our intent, as we kind of go forward, absent any direction from you today, that we would try to put together an interim program and bring that back to you very shortly so you could approve or deny that and make sure that we are on the same path and kind of aligned on that. Some key questions that we would want you to think about and consider as we kind of go forward. What is that proper permitting structure? And kind of given how fast we're sort of seeing this technology change, I don't think anyone can say what is the next thing. I'm still waiting for flying cars. Jetson's promised me that, but I haven't seen them yet. But so flying cars could be next. What's that sort of technology? What is the appropriate period of time that we would want to look at this? Would it be 6 months or a year that we would have for this encroachment agreement? What would be the kind of fees that we would want? What kind of cost recovery we would look to see for the city? What resources are we going to need for enforcement for new or existing requirements? How are the statutes going to be enforced, through the company or through the individual user? And then, of course, there will be the whole host of things that we would want to put in place, like how scooters are parked, where can they be parked, where can they be operated. Bird has been, I will say, fairly responsive so far. We have reached out to them in a number of cases about where we're seeing some scooters and kind of some of the safety issues that are there. We have reached out to them particularly to try to fence off in their app, the ability to use them and go Raleigh Station, and particularly in some of our parking garages. Just like we don't allow bicycles within the parking garage to be ridden in the parking garage, scooters sort of present similar issues along those lines. So they have, we've been working with them to try to get some of that kind of fenced off. And then lastly, if we had problems, what would be the responsible way for, and what's a responsible time frame for a vendor to cure those things? So those are all for your consideration, and we look forward to your feedback.
I have one question.
Yes.
Without an agreement with Bird or any other company, and therefore there's no indemnification in place, does that leave the city with any kind of liability?
I'm going to defer to my colleagues in the city attorney's office.
So our protections in the code for the requirement of an encroachment agreement do provide for indemnity. When someone operates in violation of that provision, it does impose some level of risk.
So, Michael, just curious, did they contact anyone here at the city before they just decided to operate on our city sidewalks?
On July 11, we heard that they were on the street in the morning. I believe myself, about 1 o'clock that afternoon, received an email that said, "Hello, we are here." I think the manager received a similar email.
That's correct. We got an email pretty much, it was either the night before or the day of.
I have some real concerns about this going on right now with the safety of folks walking up and down the sidewalks. And as far as in wearing helmets, I see more people not wearing helmets than I do see folks wearing them. There's a bunch of other things. I think we've got some liability here. I think they need to stop this business until we get this worked out.
From what I've seen, definitely one of my major concerns is the safety and also the strain it puts on us for any type of enforcement of whatever is developed. I definitely would like to see some interim steps, and we work on this once we receive the information, probably a little bit more within the Transportation and Transit Committee. But in the meantime, we have to, I'm just concerned about the safety. I was walking down the sidewalk on this hill, and someone went flying by me, and you know, I think I'm pretty agile, but someone that's a little more or less agile may not be able to get out of the way of someone. And we just, you know, recently had the incident of 3 young kids who were hit, you know, and they were on bicycles. So we definitely, you know, I'm really concerned about this. And, you know, I think Bird needs to, if they want to operate in Raleigh, be a partner with the city.
I think you've done a good job of outlining a lot of the concerns. I appreciate you talking to Charlotte, and I thought that was interesting how they carved out areas where they're not allowed on sidewalks. I guess, you know, how communication is a big piece of that. I think obviously people are enjoying them, but we do have concerns with commerce operating in the right of way without any sort of a thing with us. I mean, a little piece of me kind of wants to see them keep going, because I think we, as they're being used, we also learn a lot from that process as opposed to just halting it until we get things in place. But you know, I appreciate all this information. I'm looking forward to what you can bring back as you sort of wrap all this together.
Well, it would be our attempt to get something back very, very quickly.
In the meantime, though, I strongly suggest that we prohibit them from using our sidewalks. If they want to ride them on the streets,
They're not supposed to ride them on the sidewalks.
they're
It's
all over the sidewalk.
No, I understand. But per their own rules, you're not supposed to ride them on the sidewalks. And so I think instead of banning, we should really challenge them to do a sort of education campaign where we're doing more to get the word out about to folks to say, you're supposed to be riding on our streets. You're supposed to be riding with helmets. You're not supposed to leave these in our walkable part of our sidewalk, you're supposed to park them to the curb. I don't think banning them's the right thing, because if we decide to bring them back, folks are going to be even more confused.
Well, if you
Folks,
have a-
there's so many good things about bird scooters that we haven't even started to really talk about here. We're only talking about our fears and our concerns, and there are real safety concerns. I've talked with folks about that too. But they are incredible for your last mile commute. They're not job creators, but they're that kind of folks who need help with their wages. They're a wage gap solution. I've been talking with folks who are using this as a way to supplement their income, because they have to go out, they collect the bird scooters by 9 p.m. at night so that folks aren't getting on them after they leave the bar. It's a safety thing, and bringing them back out in the morning, and they get paid for that. It's electric mobility. There's so much great stuff about bird that we're not even considering as we're sitting here today. And I want to make sure that we're looking at this holistically. I would love to hear what BPAC comes up with as they're talking about the dockless bikes coming to town too. Give staff a bit more time to kind of figure this out before we kind of take such a drastic action.
I don't think it's a drastic action. It's like a toothless tiger. If you don't take something that's going to get these folks' attention, they're not going to have any. I mean, they came in here and started operating without asking anyone anything.
And that's how they operate throughout
Well,
the country.
that doesn't make it right. And if it's your child or someone else's child who gets hit after this meeting today, then I think that we've been short-sighted here.
So, Mayor, may I ask a
I
question,
think there's
please?
an and.
So let's just hypothetically say that we allow them to operate here as they're operating today. This is just a hypothetical. The burden of keeping them off the sidewalks falls on our police department, which are already stretched fairly thin. I don't know that I feel comfortable putting another job on the police department without being compensated by Byrd in some way legally for the use of the city and an agreement. So we're kind of caught in the middle of how do we protect our citizens, allow the birds to operate, but not putting the burden of this enforcement piece on a police department that already is stretched thin, and we're not getting any money from Byrd to help offset that. So I'm not sure how we are going to move forward as it relates to the enforcement piece. Even if we don't do a cease and desist order, how are we going to move forward with that piece?
I think that's an excellent articulation of one of the problems we have here. So.
Have you had any conversations with the Byrd people about, you know, how we know all their rules are on their app, so you agree to them. In practicality, when you put the app on your phone and you use the scooter, but where they're in other cities, does enforcement just primarily fall to the city?
Yes, ma'am. It primarily falls to the city. We will reach out to them again, following this conversation, and see what we can do about having them up their education process. The issue about scooters, about helmets, I know that they have done some work. They have the offer that for the cost of shipping, they will mail you a helmet, which I think is a very generous offer. Most bike shares don't do that. But we will reach out to them again after we complete this conversation today and go back and see if we can get them to ramp up some of those efforts. As Councilmember Stewart said, this is on their app. There's a disconnect between the sort of behavior of the company and the behavior of the user, and I think we really need to do more to educate the user in this case, and we'll enlist the help of the company to do that.
Can I ask a question? Actually, the question to Councilor Thompson. In the proposing a moratorium, I'm thinking, would we expand that to include the dockless bicycles? Because I think they seem to fall in the same gray area where we don't have any kind of permitting. We don't require helmets. We don't really enforce where they get put or how they get used. I'm really asking you.
No, excellent point. It's the same, really. A motorized vehicle of some type is the same.
Well, of course, most of the line bikes are not motorized, but
Currently, the dockless bikes, line bike, as it being sponsored by the university, most of that commerce is generated at the university. So they use our rights of way, so it's a bit of a gray area there. So
So, I guess my thought is what I thought I heard you say is you could come back pretty quickly with some interim regulations.
Yes, sir, that would be our plan.
How quick is quick?
Within the month, within
Okay.
30 days.
Well, again, I think we've got the precedent of letting Lime Bike operate without getting a good set of rules out there, and you know, I don't think any of us likes someone making use of our public right-of-ways and you know, as a revenue generating. I mean, a lot of positive things about both of them, but we need to get this under control and regulated so that our public safety thing and permitting and you know, is all clearly spelled out. And I guess I'm hoping we can start with what Charlotte is doing as an interim and so that help us fast track some ideas for at least an initial permitting program. So that's where I am.
Part of the reason that we did so much benchmarking was to look to see what was available to us. That's why I feel that with some confidence we'll come back pretty shortly to be able to pull some of the best practices out of 24 other cities that we can pull this together very quickly.
So I'm going to make a motion that we give you 60 days to meet, give 60 days to meet with the city and report back, or Bird runs the risk of being banned. 60 days.
That
And what
works.
about a ban on the sidewalk in the meantime?
Well, that already, sir, that already exists.
Already exists.
Is there anything we can do to
Second
educate
motion.
people about the not using them on the sidewalks?
We can see what we can do kind of through our normal channels, whether that's through our social media channel. We'll see what we can do about that. So
Can we distribute flyers around downtown, perhaps?
I can also talk with Downtown Raleigh Alliance as their liaison to see what else we can put in motion.
So, Nicole, when you do the app, does it come up on their app that you're not allowed to ride on the sidewalks?
Yes, sir. I can show you. I've got it on my phone.
Well, I believe you, but.
It also
the
says
thing
you have to
is,
wear a
when you get on-
helmet, you have to be
but
18.
Unfortunately, most of these scooters I see, in order to do that app, to unlock it, it's on the sidewalk already. So-
And they're supposed to be parked, not in our non-meandering pathway,
Well, they're kind of like
off to the
these Lime
side.
bikes are parked everywhere, unfortunately.
And to that point, I want to say, should we be looking to what our goal is around making sure we're kind of getting folks out of their cars and getting more alternative transportation used? I think we need more infrastructure. I think we need more bike and scooter racks. I can't believe I'm saying scooter racks now, but we need more bike and scooter racks. We need a way to kind of contain and manage this instead of letting them run over, but also not banning them.
I don't think I'm not debating you about the use of alternate transportation. I'm debating the safety and enforcement.
I'm not debating safety, because I agree with you there.
So since we're
Okay.
in agreement, and I second the motion, call the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
thank you very much.
So now it went so fast. Just
Yeah.
one last thing, and that is, you're talking about better education in the interim. It seems like Bird themselves, they're facing this exact question in every city they're in. Is there any reason why we shouldn't ask them to improve their communication about safety issues in the interim?
We will.
Okay.
We will.
And I understand y'all have, and
Yes.
DRA has, and I want to thank you for all the work you've been doing while we've been on break, just hanging out, so, thank you.
All should be bared by them, not us.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Next